parenting is very, very difficult. And I think I like to use a lot of analogies. And one analogy I might use is it's the analogy to baseball. In baseball, there's so many things that happen. There are singles and doubles, and there's all kind of hits, and there's home runs, and there's outs, and there's errors. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly what happens along the process of raising kids. But if you practice hard enough at the game of baseball, sooner or later you get very good. And that's my message to parents. If you dive in, you can in fact get very, very good at the game. And there can be celebration at the end of the game, mm-hmm. at the end of the time that you have raised and developed your child. There can be a lot of celebration. But by the way, and I know it's pretty hard-nosed to say it, but that's the only time that you should have the celebration. Mm-hmm. You should have celebration following some form of success. When your standards are low, even the corrupt and incompetent have a voice. And it just isn't the way to do it. And I would want to give strong advice by saying that kids, you get a better product from that kid, from your child, from your athlete, if you are on the problem early on. Early on is where the value really rests. Right. And that's, let me read one other thing to you, and it is this. The leadership of kids. This is not something you can mow around. Mm-hmm. It is not something you can jump over. It's not something you can delay. Failure to act permits children to grow in an atmosphere of complicity. And that means parents simply can't be complicit. Parents can't simply agree with everything that's going on. You got to put a halt to some of it. You have to set standards. You have to say, this is what you're going to accomplish. You have to get an agreement from the child on what he or she will be doing. Mm-hmm. You can't just be complicit. You can't just, you can't eat all the food that's put on the plate. You can't eat everything that a child happens to have to say to you. I genuinely believe that parents can end up with whatever kind of child they want. They can develop him or her into one wonderful, caring, hardworking, successful person, or they can have simply too many problems along the road. And that's the kind of thing that I want to be able to help with. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to guide parents. I want to be able to help manage parents. Mom and Dad, if you don't know what's going on, you can't manage change. If you're following the leadership of other parents, if you're only interested in your kid getting a year-end award, or you're interested in you, for example, remaining popular with other parents, and you forget about answering the question, what is my child up to? What is he or she accomplishing? What direction are they heading? And then if you don't know those things, you can't manage your business. People are motivated, I believe, because things happen to them. Mm-hmm. They are motivated because of things they see. They're motivated because of things that they care about.
Right, motivated either by desperation or inspiration.
Right, that's exactly right. I coached right out of college. Then I went into the corporate world. And one of the jobs that I had was Vice President of Human Resources, and we had 43,000 employees. So we were busy. And then I returned to coaching, and after about 26, 27 years in the corporate world, and I returned and was back in coaching from about 1996 until just last year. At 76 years of age, and I do feel like it's old, I found second time around meaning the second time that I coached. I found that kids were very much the same. They had not changed. I found that parents had really changed. And I found that parents were not managing kids as effectively as they once were. A good dose of religion positively affects that environment. And it's good for parents to stick their kids' nose right in the middle of that.
Right.
They need to have that information that comes to them from churches so that they can make a decision that is a healthier one. One item that I really want to make sure that people hear, and that is that it's this whole 6th grade syndrome that I talk about. And parents, I want you to know that that's the age at which change really begins to happen. Simply, I love to ask 6th and 7th graders. I'll kind of get up against them and talk, and I said, hey, 6th and 7th grade's pretty tough. And they'll say, why is that, Coach? And I say, because that's when you begin to hear about drugs. That's when you begin to hear the language of other kids changing. That's when things that are talked about at the school change. They get tougher. I said, you're going to be exposed to a lot. And I'll say to a 6th grader, and do you have the backbone to walk away from that? Do you have the backbone to say to somebody who's talking about drugs, do you have the ability to shove that aside and not pay any attention to them? And parents have to know what that environment is.
Absolutely.
If they're going to manage change. Mom and Dad, kids got to come first. I know you're working, and you should work hard, and you should remind your children of your sacrifices for them. But kids have got to come first, and kids have to be given a lot of your time. But I would just say to parents that the roadmap for a child's success is on your shoulders. Young people need support for a long, long time. And I would just simply say that there is a reason why children or humans don't vote or aren't allowed to vote until they're 18. There's a reason that they can't or are not permitted to drink until they're 21. There's a reason they can't rent a car until they're 25. It's because, quote, they ain't ready, and end quote. And that is exactly the whole theme. And I get a little hard-nosed about the whole thing because I will tell you that some of the time as a football coach, there was not an ounce of democracy on my team. I was the guy that was running it. We were going to run my plays. We were going to run my offense. We were going to run my defense. And I think parents have to be that way too. Now, is there a soft side? Absolutely. There have got to be hugs and kisses and lots of attention and a lot of laughter, but there has to be that line of demarcation that a child doesn't cross. And you got to draw it. You got to be tough enough to draw that line. You got to set those standards. I have spent 5 years and then another 22 with kids, and so I have gotten to know them. As the Vice President of Human Resources for a very large company, I looked at a lot of finished products. Right. People who were college graduates, had their master's degree in some cases, that we were hiring, and some were ready to go to work, and some certainly were not. Mm-hmm. Some failed right away, and then some you could look at and you saw an absolute jewel. Mm-hmm. And so many of those young people would talk about people who raised them would talk about their parents, would talk about their business environment, because I love to, because I was an ex-coach, sit and say, hey, where'd you come out of? Tell me about your environment. Tell me about your college. Tell me about your family. And 99% of the time, they came from a healthy, achieving environment with either parents or family leaders who had given them a lot. You know, it is totally possible, Joe, for the magic to go out of a child's life if that child is not developed and a lot of time spent with them. They don't have to get all A's, they don't have to get all B's, but if they're a C student, and that's really where they belong, they can't do better than that, then that is just wonderful. Make doggone good and sure that they get C's and there's not a lot of other stuff thrown in that's going to sidetrack that kid down the road. Because I will tell you this, a large number of kids who are perhaps underperformers in high school, because of their training and education and love and support that they got, turn out to be a marvelously successful person